I was the only one who cared for my dying father for years. When he passed, he left my sister a $950K house. I got the old, crumbling lake house. Guess you were the worst daughter, my sister laughed. But when I stepped inside that house, what I found changed everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Margaret Patterson, and at 67, I thought I'd learned not to expect fairness from life. But standing in that lawyer's office 3 days after Dad's funeral, listening to his will being read, I discovered there are depths of cruelty I never imagined. To my daughter Patricia, I leave my primary residence at 4521 Maple Drive, valued at approximately $950,000. My sister Patricia's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her Hermes purse as she tried to look appropriately somber. She was failing miserably. And to my daughter Margaret, I leave the lake house property on Clearwater Road. The lawyer's voice was clinical, professional. He didn't mention that the lake house property was a rotting cabin I hadn't seen in 15 years. Patricia waited exactly 30 seconds after we left the office before the knife went in. "Well, Maggie," she said, using the childhood nickname I'd always hated, "I guess we know who Dad really loved." Her laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Guess you were the worst daughter after all." I wanted to remind her about the 3 years I spent driving 2 hours each way to Dad's house every single day. About the physical therapy appointments, the doctor visits, the nights I slept in his uncomfortable guest room chair because he was afraid to be alone. About how she visited exactly 6 times in those 3 years, always with an excuse about being too busy with her successful real estate business. But I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that arguing with Patricia was like wrestling with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it. The drive to Clearwater Road took 47 minutes through winding back roads I barely remembered. The lake house sat on 2 acres of overgrown property, its weathered shingles curling like arthritic fingers. Paint peeled from the shutters, and the front porch sagged like an old man's shoulders. "Perfect," I muttered, fishing the ancient key from my purse. My inheritance, a money pit with a view. But when I turned that key and stepped inside, my sarcasm died in my throat. The interior should have been musty and dark, filled with the stale air of abandonment. Instead, someone had been maintaining this place. Recent maintenance. The hardwood floors gleamed with fresh polish. Dust covers protected furniture that was far too nice for a forgotten cabin. And in the kitchen, still warm in the coffee maker, was a pot of coffee that couldn't have been brewed more than an hour ago. I stood frozen, my hand still on the doorknob, processing what this meant. Either someone was squatting in my newly inherited property, or Dad had been keeping secrets, big ones. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing through rooms that smelled faintly of lemon oil and vanilla candles. "Anyone here?" Silence answered me, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence of held breath, of someone waiting. I walked through the living room, noting the comfortable furniture, the flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, the bookshelf filled with mysteries and romance novels. This wasn't a man cave or a hunting lodge. This was a home, a carefully maintained, lovingly decorated home. In the bedroom, I found the first real clue. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph of my father, but he looked different, younger somehow, despite his gray hair. He was smiling, really smiling, not the tired grimace I'd grown accustomed to in his final years. His arm was around a woman I'd never seen before. She was probably 60, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and laugh lines around bright blue eyes. She wore a yellow sundress and looked at my father like he hung the moon and stars personally for her entertainment. "Well, well, well, Dad," I said to the photograph. "What other surprises did you leave me?" I picked up the frame, studying the woman's face. Something about her seemed familiar, but I couldn't place where I might have seen her. The photo looked recent, within the last year or two, based on how Dad looked. A noise from the kitchen made me freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the hardwood floor. Someone was definitely in the house. My first instinct was to call out again, but something stopped me. If this woman, because the footsteps sounded distinctly feminine, had a key and felt comfortable enough to make coffee, then she knew more about my father's secrets than I did. I slipped the photograph into my purse and crept toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Through the doorway, I could see a figure moving around the kitchen with easy familiarity. It was her, the woman from the photograph. She was washing coffee cups at the sink, humming softly to herself. In person, she was even more striking than in the photograph, confident in the way women get when they've stopped caring what others think about their choices. I cleared my throat. She turned, and for a moment we stared at each other across Dad's secret kitchen. Her eyes were indeed blue, but they held a sharpness that the photograph hadn't captured. This was a woman who didn't suffer fools gladly. "You must be Margaret," she said finally, drying her hands on a dish towel embroidered with tiny ducks. Her voice was warm but cautious. "I'm Eleanor, Eleanor Walsh." Eleanor, I tested the name. "And you would be?" "Someone your father cared about very much." She hung the towel carefully on its hook. "I've been expecting you." The casual way she said it, like she'd been waiting for a dinner guest instead of the daughter of a man who'd apparently been living a double life, made my jaw clench. "Expecting me? That's interesting, because I had no idea you existed until 5 minutes ago." I pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down uninvited. "So why don't you tell me exactly what your relationship was with my father?" Eleanor studied me for a long moment, then poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. She didn't offer me one. "Richard and I were companions. Friends. More than friends, if you want the complete truth." "For how long?" 7 years. 7 years. I did the math. That meant this relationship started while Mom was still alive, during her final battle with cancer. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "So, you were his mistress." The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Eleanor's eyes flashed. "I was the woman who made him happy when your mother was dying, and your sister was too busy to visit, and you—" She paused, seeming to reconsider her words. "When you were carrying the weight of everything alone." "Don't." I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Don't you dare make this about me. I'm not making it about anything except the truth." Eleanor remained perfectly calm, which somehow made everything worse. "Your father was a good man caught in an impossible situation. Your mother was dying slowly, painfully. You were drowning trying to care for both of them. He was watching his family fall apart and feeling helpless. So he ran to you. He found comfort with me. There's a difference." I wanted to scream at her, to rage about loyalty and commitment and how marriage vows don't come with escape clauses. But something in her tone stopped me. This wasn't a woman making excuses. This was a woman stating facts. "Where does that leave me now?" I asked. "This is my house now, legally." Eleanor smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Actually, it's not." "Excuse me?" Eleanor walked to a kitchen drawer and pulled out a manila folder. She set it on the table between us like a poker player laying down a royal flush. "Your father was many things. Sentimental, stubborn, occasionally foolish when it came to his daughters. But he wasn't careless with legal documents." She opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers covered in official-looking seals and signatures. "This house was transferred to a living trust 3 years ago. I'm the primary beneficiary." I stared at the documents, trying to process what she was telling me. "But the will leaves you the property at Clearwater Road. This property." She gestured around the kitchen. "But the house itself, and everything in it, belongs to the Clearwater Trust, which belongs to me." The implications hit me like a series of slaps. Dad hadn't just given me a worthless inheritance, he'd given me a piece of land with someone else's house on it. Property I couldn't sell, couldn't mortgage, couldn't do anything with except pay taxes on. "You're telling me I inherited the dirt but not the building?" "Essentially, yes." I sat back down, hard. Patricia's laughter echoed in my memory. "Guess you were the worst daughter." If she only knew how much worse it actually was. "Although," Eleanor continued, "there is something else you should know." Of course there was. In my experience, when someone says, "there's something else," it's never good news. Your father left specific instructions. Letters, actually. One for you, one for Patricia. Eleanor pulled 2 sealed envelopes from the folder. "He asked me to give them to you both after the will was read." I took the envelope with my name written in Dad's familiar handwriting. The paper felt heavy, substantial. Whatever he had to say, it wasn't going to be brief. What about Patricia? That's between her and Richard, although I suspect her letter contains some interesting information about her inheritance as well. I tore open the envelope, my hands shaking slightly. The letter was 3 pages long. written in Dad's careful script. The first line made my breath catch. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, then you've met Eleanor and discovered my secret. By now, you're probably angry, confused, and feeling betrayed. Let me explain. I looked up at Eleanor, who was watching me carefully. Did you read this? He read parts of it to me, not all. I turned back to the letter, my father's voice echoing in my mind as I read his words. What he told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The house on Maple Drive isn't actually mine to give. It belongs to your sister. I read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. Then I read it aloud to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The house on Maple Drive isn't actually mine to give. It belongs to your sister. Eleanor nodded grimly. Keep reading. 3 years ago, when your mother's medical bills became overwhelming, I was facing bankruptcy. The house was going to go into foreclosure. Patricia offered to buy it from me, quietly, allowing me to remain as a tenant until my death. She paid $950,000 for a house she already owned, technically speaking. The will simply makes that ownership official. I set the letter down and stared at Eleanor. So, Patricia has been the legal owner of Dad's house for 3 years? Correct. And she let everyone think Dad was leaving it to her in his will? Also correct. I picked up the letter again, my hands trembling with something that wasn't grief anymore. It was rage. But here's what your sister doesn't know, and what you need to understand. Patricia's purchase of the house wasn't entirely legal. She used her position as my financial power of attorney to essentially sell the house to herself at below market value. What she did constitutes elder financial abuse. The pieces started falling into place. Patricia's real estate business, her insistence on handling Dad's finances in his final years, her convenient absence during his day-to-day care. I have documentation of everything, the letter continued. Bank records, correspondence, proof that she manipulated me into signing documents I didn't fully understand. I kept quiet because I needed her help and because I hoped she would eventually do the right thing. I looked at Eleanor. How much of this did you know? All of it. Your father and I had many long conversations about his daughters, about Patricia's manipulation and your sacrifice. She refilled her coffee cup, then finally poured one for me. He felt tremendous guilt about what Patricia was doing, and tremendous regret about the burden you carried alone. If he knew what she was doing, why didn't he stop her? Because by the time he fully understood what had happened, he was dependent on both of you in different ways. Patricia controlled his finances. You controlled his daily care. He was afraid that exposing Patricia would destroy any chance of his family healing. I continued reading. The lake house property is worth far more than anyone realizes. I had it surveyed last year. The land alone is valued at $1.2 million due to water rights and recent commercial development in the area. But more importantly, there's something on the property that Patricia doesn't know about. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. In 1987, the year after your mother and I bought the lake house, I discovered something while doing foundation repairs. I never told anyone, not even your mother, but I documented everything and made sure the secret died with me. Except now, it doesn't have to. The letter ended with coordinates and instructions to look under the loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. Eleanor watched me process this information with the patience of someone who'd had months to absorb these revelations herself. You knew about whatever's hidden here? I knew Richard had found something valuable. I knew it was part of why he felt comfortable transferring the house to the trust. He wanted to make sure you'd have something substantial. Something that would compensate for years of sacrifice. Eleanor set down her coffee cup. I don't know the specifics. I walked to the bedroom, Eleanor following. The closet was small, filled with men's clothing that still smelled faintly of Dad's aftershave. In the back corner, I found the loose board he'd described. Underneath was a metal box, sealed with heavy tape that had yellowed with age. Inside the box were photographs, documents, and a journal wrapped in plastic. The photographs showed the lake house as it was being built, but they also showed something else. Artifacts, pottery, tools, what looked like jewelry. Native American artifacts based on the distinctive patterns and craftsmanship. Dad's journal documented everything methodically. Dates, descriptions, photographs of each piece in situ. He'd discovered what appeared to be a significant Native American settlement site, possibly several hundred years old. My God, I whispered, flipping through pages of careful documentation. This could be worth millions, Eleanor finished. But more than that, it's historically significant. Your father spent 37 years researching, documenting, protecting this site. He never exploited it because he felt it needed to be preserved properly. The final entry in the journal was dated 2 months before Dad's death. I've contacted Dr. Sarah Bennett at the State Archaeological Commission. She's agreed to survey the site after my death. Margaret will need to coordinate with her. This discovery belongs to history, but the finder's fee and property rights should secure Margaret's future. I sat on the bed, overwhelmed. In the span of 2 hours, I'd gone from inheriting a worthless shack to potentially being responsible for a major archaeological discovery. There's more, Eleanor said quietly. She handed me a business card. Dr. Sarah Bennett, State Archaeological Commission. Someone had written a date on the back, tomorrow's date, and a time, 2 p.m. Your father arranged everything. Dr. Bennett will be here tomorrow to begin the preliminary survey. If the site is as significant as he believed, you'll receive compensation as the landowner, plus a percentage of any museum acquisitions. My phone buzzed. A text message from Patricia. Hope you enjoy your little shack, sis. Maybe you can turn it into a nice trailer park. LOL. I showed the message to Eleanor, who shook her head in disgust. Your sister has no idea what she's just lost, does she? No, I said, looking around at the house that suddenly felt different, charged with possibility and secrets. But she's about to find out. Because tomorrow, when Dr. Bennett arrived, everything would change. And Patricia's perfect world was about to come crashing down in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Dr. Sarah Bennett arrived at exactly 2 p.m., driving a dusty Jeep loaded with equipment that looked like it belonged on a space mission. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with short auburn hair and the kind of practical clothes that said she spent more time digging in dirt than sitting in offices. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Sarah Bennett. Her handshake was firm, her eyes bright with excitement. Your father was quite the amateur archaeologist. His documentation is extraordinary. We walked the property together, Eleanor staying tactfully in the house. Dr. Bennett used some kind of ground-penetrating radar device, taking readings and making notes on a tablet. This is remarkable, she said after about an hour. The site appears to extend well beyond what your father initially discovered. We're looking at what could be a significant pre-Columbian settlement, possibly dating back 800 years. The dollar signs were practically flashing in my head, but I tried to play it cool. What does that mean, practically speaking? For you? Substantial compensation. For history? Potentially rewriting what we know about indigenous settlements in this region. She packed up her equipment. I'll need to bring a full team next week, but based on these preliminary readings, I can tell you that your property rights as landowner will be worth considerable money. After she left, I called Patricia. Time to have some fun. Maggie. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the way it always got when she thought she'd won something. How's your little cabin in the woods? Oh, it's full of surprises, I said, settling into one of Eleanor's comfortable chairs. Actually, I'm calling because I need some advice about selling property. The pause was delicious. Selling? Already? Well, it turns out the lake house might be worth more than I thought. I had it appraised. Not technically a lie. The land value alone is quite impressive. How impressive? Patricia's voice had lost its sweetness. Let's just say it might be worth more than Dad's house on Maple Drive. Another pause. Longer this time. That's impossible, Maggie. That property is worthless. Well, the appraiser seemed to think differently. Something about water rights and development potential. I was enjoying this far too much. Anyway, I should let you go. I have some phone calls to make about the sale. I hung up before she could respond. Patricia showed up unannounced the next morning, driving her white BMW like she was fleeing a crime scene. I watched from the kitchen window as she parked crooked and marched to the front door with the determined stride of someone about to demand satisfaction. We need to talk, she announced when Eleanor opened the door. Patricia, I called from the kitchen. How lovely! Coffee! She stalked into the kitchen, her perfectly styled hair looking slightly windblown. I want to know what kind of game you're playing. Game? I poured coffee into Dad's favorite mug, the one that said, "World's Greatest Father," that I'd given him 20 years ago. I'm not playing any games. I'm just exploring my options as a property owner. There's no way that dump is worth what you implied yesterday. Dump? Eleanor's voice was ice cold. This house has been lovingly maintained for 7 years. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she took in Eleanor's proprietary tone. And you are? Eleanor Walsh. I was your father's companion. His what? Girlfriend, I clarified helpfully. For 7 years, they were quite devoted to each other. Patricia's face went through several interesting color changes. That's impossible. Dad would never… Never what? Find happiness after Mom died? I sat down across from her. Or never keep secrets from his daughters? This is ridiculous. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling my real estate agent. We'll get an actual appraisal. Good idea. I leaned back in my chair. Although you might want to wait until after the archaeological survey is complete. Patricia froze. Patricia, archaeological survey? Oh, didn't I mention? The state is sending a team to excavate what appears to be a significant Native American settlement on the property. Dad documented the whole thing before he died. I sipped my coffee. Turns out he was quite the amateur archaeologist. You're lying. Eleanor disappeared into the bedroom and returned with Dad's journal, setting it on the table. Patricia flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each photograph. This can't be real. Dr. Bennett from the State Archaeological Commission seemed to think it was very real. She's bringing a full team next week. Patricia's hands were shaking as she closed the journal. I want half. Half of what? Whatever this is worth. I'm his daughter too. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. Patricia, sweetie, you already got your half. You got the $950,000 house, remember? That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Dad divided his assets exactly as he intended. I leaned forward. Of course, if you'd like to discuss the legal ownership of that house. Her face went dead white. What do you mean? Time for the kill shot. I mean the house you inherited 3 days ago? The one you've actually owned for 3 years? I pulled Dad's letter from my purse. The one you bought from him using your power of attorney. Essentially selling his house to yourself? Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you're talking about. Elder financial abuse, Patricia. That's what it's called when someone in a position of trust manipulates an elderly person into financial transactions that benefit the manipulator. I unfolded the letter. Dad documented everything. He needed the money for Mom's medical bills. He needed help, not exploitation. Eleanor's voice was sharp. There's a difference between helping and stealing. I didn't steal anything. I paid fair market value. Below market value, I corrected. For a house you then allowed him to believe he still owned, while you collected the tax benefits of ownership. I stood up. But don't worry, I'm not going to report you to the authorities. Patricia's relief was visible. You're not? No, because you're going to make things right voluntarily. What do you want? I want you to transfer half the value of the Maple Drive house to me. $475,000. Consider it back payment for 3 years of Dad's care while you were busy playing real estate mogul. That's extortion. That's justice. You can transfer the money, or I can take Dad's documentation to the district attorney and let them sort it out. I shrugged. Your choice. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating costs and benefits in her head. And if I do this, we're even? We're even. Fine. But I want it in writing. Already prepared. Eleanor produced a legal document from the manila folder. One of the advantages of dating a woman who spent 30 years as a paralegal. Patricia read through the agreement, her jaw clenching tighter with each clause. Finally, she signed it with sharp, angry strokes. You've changed, Maggie. Yes, I said. I've stopped being stupid. After Patricia left, Eleanor and I sat on the front porch, watching her BMW disappear down the road. How does it feel? Eleanor asked. Like I can finally breathe again. But the best part was still coming. Dr. Bennett's team arrived the following Monday with enough equipment to excavate King Tut's tomb. Within 3 days, they'd uncovered pottery fragments, tools, and what appeared to be the foundation of a significant structure. This is extraordinary, Dr. Bennett told me, as we stood watching her team carefully brush dirt from a piece of intricately carved stone. We're looking at a major find. The settlement is larger and more sophisticated than anything we've discovered in this region. And financially, the finder's fee alone will be substantial. Plus, as the landowner, you'll receive compensation for the archaeological easement, And if any artifacts are acquired by museums, you'll receive a percentage. She paused. We're talking about 7 figures. Minimum. 7 figures. I sat down hard on a folding chair someone had left nearby. There's something else, Dr. Bennett continued. The National Geographic Society has expressed interest in documenting the excavation. They're talking about a television special, possibly a series. I thought about Patricia, probably sitting in her stolen house, calculating how much money she thought she'd saved by manipulating Dad. She had no idea that while she'd been stealing hundreds of thousands, I was sitting on millions. That evening, Eleanor and I celebrated with a bottle of wine on the front porch. Your father would be so proud, she said, raising her glass. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I looked out over the property where floodlights illuminated the dig site. He spent 37 years protecting this place, waiting for the right moment. The right moment? For me to be ready to handle it. 3 years ago, I would have sold this place to the first developer who made an offer. I would have let Patricia steamroll me into splitting everything 50-50. I sipped my wine. But losing everything, discovering his secrets, meeting you, it all changed me. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Saw the news trucks. What's going on? I showed the message to Eleanor, who grinned wickedly. Want to have some fun? I typed back, archaeological discovery. Quite significant. Should be on the evening news. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Margaret. Patricia's voice was strained. I think we should talk. About what? I think our agreement was too hasty. Maybe we should renegotiate. Our agreement is signed and legally binding, Patricia. Besides, I thought you said the property was worthless. Things change. Yes, they do. But our deal doesn't. I hung up and turned off my phone. The final revelation was still to come. The National Geographic cameras arrived 2 weeks later, turning my quiet lake house into a media circus. Dr. Bennett's team had uncovered what they were calling one of the most significant pre-Columbian sites east of the Mississippi. Patricia showed up during filming, trying to insert herself into the story. I'm Margaret's sister, she told the reporter. Our father always knew this property was special. I watched her performance with fascination. After everything that had happened, she still thought she could manipulate her way into a share of something that wasn't hers. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Martinez, wasn't buying it. But you didn't inherit this property, did you? Well, no, but family is family. Mrs. Patterson, Jennifer turned to me. How does it feel to go from what many people assumed was the unlucky daughter to potentially one of the wealthiest women in the county? I looked directly into the camera. It feels like justice. Later, after the cameras packed up and Patricia slunk away, Eleanor and I walked down to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the sunset like a mirror. So what now? Eleanor asked. Now I honor Dad's wishes. The site gets properly preserved. The artifacts go to museums where people can learn from them. And I use the money to live the life I should have been living all along. Any regrets? I thought about that. I regret that Dad felt he couldn't tell me the truth while he was alive. I regret the years I spent thinking I wasn't good enough, smart enough, successful enough. I picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. But I don't regret Patricia getting exactly what she deserved. Which was? The knowledge that while she was stealing hundreds of thousands, she was also giving up millions. I turned to Eleanor. She'll spend the rest of her life knowing that her greed cost her everything. 6 months later, I was featured on the cover of Archaeology Today magazine. The article was titled, The Accidental Archaeologist, How One Woman's Inheritance Rewrote History. Patricia never contacted me again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd put the Maple Drive house on the market. Apparently, the property taxes and maintenance on a house she'd bought with stolen money were more than she could handle. As for me, I kept the lake house, established a foundation to support archaeological research, and at the age of 67, finally learned what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than what I could do for other people. Sometimes the worst inheritance turns out to be the best gift you never knew you needed. And sometimes the sister who gets everything loses more than she could ever imagine. The lake house taught me that secrets have a way of revealing themselves when the time is right. And revenge, when it comes naturally, tastes sweeter than any inheritance ever could. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.